about hearing, when we were in Vegas, you were hearing from people about being uncool. How much of that do you think stems back to the angle with the elite and the neck brace from a year ago?
It started before that. I think that it started with the podcasters who were doing the AEW's going to die, their ratings are terrible when they were actually great, and basically it gotten people into that entire thing. And a lot of it was fueled under the table by WWE to people that they like as well. That AEW is just they're doing terrible, they're doing horrible, they're losing money. Like it just freaked people out when AEW started being profitable, and they just lived in they're denying people were in denial about it because they've been told so often by so many people that this you get told for years and years and years that the guy is a whatever the words are that people use, and it becomes the reality, the reality of they're losing tons of money, but they're actually not. Nobody knows how to, whatever it is you get told, they don't know how to wrestle in a way that's ever going to draw the masses. You know what I mean? Which is just like total bullshit. You know what I mean? That has to do. They drew fine with this wrestling, and then they didn't when WWE got hot because WWE was the in thing, and that's for 100 years in promotional wars. It has never come down to match quality ever. Even before television, it has always been the perceived star quality and who was perceived as number one and who was perceived as most important. And no matter what you do, the only way to change that, which WCW was able to do, is basically buy up all the top stars of the other company. And, for all the talk about bottomless money and willing to lose money, it's like he didn't buy Roman Reigns, he didn't buy Lesnar, he didn't buy Heyman, he didn't buy, Rollins and people like that. You know what I mean? So the method he used, which is the New Japan guys and the top indie guys, and a few WWE guys here and there that weren't happy in WWE, or in case Danielson were, but had reasons that they would be happier elsewhere. That was his formula. It's a tough one. But in the end, like it wasn't foolish because he ended up getting this because it's the TV deal, and he's having a ball, booking wrestling, and he's learning, and there's always going to be mistakes. Not everything's going to hit, and we complain about the various different things, but as far as turning that around, man, everyone in the world wants to know how to do that, because if everyone knew how to do that, everyone would, in the entertainment world would be on top of the world. The reality is there's only a few that are, and it's a matter of right place, right time, and luck, and different advantages that you have that WWE would have, especially right now, because like now you've got all these like actual media stars who before they would want like lots of money to lower ourselves to WWE. Now they just want to be in WWE, and you know what I mean. And AEW doesn't have that. You don't have people going like, oh man, like it's cool, I want to be on AEW television. If they were to get that, that would perhaps the right people, perhaps that would change it. But it's really hard. Like look, PFL hasn't been able to pull that off. Coker never could pull that off. TNA never could pull that off. I mean, you could say Bischoff pulled it off for a couple of years, but people who forget how big Hulk Hogan was. Like if Hulk Hogan's bigger than anyone, Hulk Hogan is bigger than anyone in WWE now. I mean, he would have to get Cody, Roman, Punk, all of them. Like Seth, all of them to equal Hulk Hogan. And if he did get them, he'd be rock and rolling, and then there would be a real fight. But,
Paul and I have had this conversation, so he probably knows my answer. But I think it starts with all of a sudden you're hearing about the Punk problems and all of the placating of Punk and doing everything you can to make him happy, and then him still bailing because he got himself fired. I think that really, because what that did is, because I think your answer is right, but what that did is it just gave those people fuel to go, see, we're right. He's not a boss. This is what we've been saying, and then it just gave them fuel. Basically,
100%. You're right. The way that thing was handled was from the start to finish. The way that thing was handled was a great detriment to AEW, and a great plus when he went to WWE. Especially coming on the Cody. So yeah, and the funny thing is I'm trying to remember when this was. I think it was just one of the back issues that was put up or something. It was back issue, whatever it was. I was reading, and I think I was reading some stuff about WCW, and back issue on WCW in the late 90s, when it was starting to fall apart. And the funny thing is, and it was like that late '98 period. And it actually wasn't even a back issue. It's Mark Monday's book I was reading. Okay, so we'll talk about when it comes out. But I'm reading.
Are we going to get Mark on the show?
I think we should. Yeah. So Mark Monday's wrote a book on the NWO, and kind of like the rise and the fall. So I'm reading this book, and when you read the book, you realize that the backstage problems that WCW had were way worse than AEW, and of course they fell far harder than AEW as well. But they were way worse. That he had far greater name talent than AEW ever had, and still collapsed. And just the issues with they're all buddies now, but all the issues with Nash and Hogan and the infighting and the Sting, like the Hogan Sting thing, from the Starrcade and everything. And if you go through all that, it's like he had way. People go like, well, the one difference between him and Tony is that at least he could, he had control of his locker room. And it's like he actually had way less.
Well, the thing about it is his locker room was full of sharks because of how the business was back then. It's different today, and they all pretty much made sure that they were kind of out of the Vince fight so that they could always go back to him when they needed to.
Well, that's the one thing they were all. But the one thing that was really interesting was, again, in wrestling, and some of this was the perception of the wrestlers and everything. I mean, remember Eric's name was ATM Eric, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. For so long. And at one point when he had that rep, the fact is the company was making a good amount of money. And it was like, he's not overpaying them because they're a profitable company. Now later, of course, when their revenue dropped and they started losing a lot of money, of course, in that sense, by the profit loss standards, they were overpaid. But and I remember like when I was looking at Luger's contract, when I was doing some stuff on Luger and the Observer, and it's like, I forgot, how much they were paying. Luger was a big star and all, but they were paying him so much money, and Hall and Nash and everything compared to what their revenues were. And it was the same knock on Tony, the exact same knock on Tony. Is that he's overpaying these guys. Well, now they're profitable, so he's not. But obviously, if they lose their TV deal, then they're going to be in rough shape. But it was just the similarities. Were there. It's like they never had control. But yeah, I do think that those guys were way more self-serving, selfish, didn't give a shit about the business than the wrestlers today. I mean,
I remember reading. I don't remember. It could have been when we were covering. John and I, La Rock and I were covering 97 and 98. I remember there's a point where Hogan's contract comes up. And you're writing about WWE's an option, WCW's an option, and I sensed in reading it Eric knew the value. Eric even publicly would say what Hogan's value was. So Hogan had so much leverage in getting money from WCW.
He had incredible leverage, and you know what I mean? He was worth the money until he wasn't. I mean, that's the thing. And but at one point it's like your run is over, and you're still getting paid that money. Now you're not worth it anymore, and that's a different issue. Core Jade, by the way,
she's been tweeting. So it definitely looked like it. I hadn't seen anyone verify it, but she was definitely tweeting about it.
It's funny. She was like their darling not all that long ago. So I wonder what happened there.
Yeah, they were putting her with a lot of the top new women, and she didn't really fit by the style of work, but it still seemed like they had plans for her. So that would have had to have been changed very recently, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I am going to guess that a lot of these people will probably end up in TNA. I mean, TNA is the place for the people who like it feels like rather than it's what TNA always was. I mean, they got some guy like Leon Slater's so fantastic, but they the argument is that they don't have the TV exposure, and they don't, and so anyone. Yeah, I could see people, just with TNA, just like, oh my God, it's Dakota Kai or whatever, like they just on New York, just as an example. I could see her in TNA easily. She's got personality, I'm surprised. I'm a little bit surprised that she never got a main roster chance, but I can sort of see why, because like when she was very high in the list in NXT, it was like you didn't have Julia, you didn't have Stephanie. You know what I mean? It's like the standard has grown so much for the women in NXT, and she didn't grow to that level. She was at this level, which was fine then, and now the level's here. And when I watched, it was like, Roxanne Perez just like blew her out of the water essentially.
Okay, so we'll try and keep on track here because there's some other things we wanted to talk about. There's been a change in creative. Christine Lubrano is no longer with WWE. She was the senior vice president of creative writing operations.
Yeah, I mean, essentially with her is look, you can see today they're making cuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They made office cuts yesterday. They made talent cuts today. Okay, so with her, that's the reason it happened yesterday. The basic gist that I was told is that her job and Bruce Pritchard's job were very similar, and they didn't need two people to do that job. And there were other executive assistants they can pick up. It was essentially cutting up a position, and that's again when it comes to WWE's always been like this, and TKO even more. It's like it's always about reducing costs. So that's what happened, and it's interesting. So I think didn't Jennifer Pepperman tweet something like
it was pretty vague. So it could be taken in different ways as far as what she tweeted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I immediately saw that when I saw that news as well. So Hollywood Demons on the Von Erichs, I did finish it.
Mm-hmm.
There was one thing wrong with the show, or else it would have been an all-timer for me, and it is the culture writer who was there to kind of be the narrator. And she was not her fault, but she should not have been the person. I'm sure she may do it for some of the other shows, which probably lean a little bit closer to her expertise.
I should have been that person. I hate to say that because now I sound like egotistical, but I should have been that person. Because there's one thing, believe me, I lived there when it happened. That subject, I've written about it so much. I mean, when I wrote about it this week, I wrote another giant story on it. When it was over, it was kind of like, I've written so much about these guys, and it's maybe the last big article I ever write on. Although, hopefully for a long, long, long time, because obviously if something happened to Kevin, I would have to write something. But I hope that never happens, or it doesn't happen in the next 25 years. But it's yeah. I mean, that's whatever. But I really thought Kevin was tremendous in it. I thought they pretty much captured the essence of it. And what I liked about it was that it was different from all the other ones, because the other ones were all wrestling storyline. This one really, like, they didn't go. It wasn't a wrestling storyline thing. It was the story of a family that happened to be wrestlers that were very, very famous for a period of time, and a lot of brothers died, and the one survived, and he's very closely knit with his family. And but I don't know. Yeah, do you have any questions or comments on it?
Well, I would say that hearing from Carrie's daughters was good, even though they were very young when he passed away. Just seeing them, because they are, and then his oldest daughter talking about having the discussion with him where he was saying he must have been so